For the first session of day 4 of the Covering Equitable Community Development Journalism Fellowship, we're joined by journalist Rob Chaney. Rob has lived and worked in Montana for how many years?
All of them.
All of his years. And he actually epitomizes what the National Press Foundation considers its key component of our training strategy, and that is providing journalists like you with access to seasoned veterans whose insights and guidance can really strengthen your expertise in covering issues. Rob is joining us today for a conversation about reporting on the environment and sustainable climate impact solutions. You can read his full bio on our website at nationalpress.org. But NPF is especially proud to say that Rob is a recipient of the 2024 Kozik Environmental Justice Reporting Grant. So I'm sure you're going to benefit greatly from hearing from Rob, as are we. So Rob, thank you so much for joining us, and please take it away.
Thank you very kindly. So you get my really deep morning voice. Can everybody hear me? I want to thank you all for coming here. It's really a pleasure to have a chance to expose Montana to a much wider reading audience. For any of those of you who watch Yellowstone, you'll notice that mass media has kind of decided Montana's cool. There's some reasons for that, and a lot of them are really newsy. Just quick audience participation part here. How many folks are health reporters, like specialized, specifically health reporting? Okay. How many of you are growth local government? Okay. How many are business? Okay. How many are science? One? Mm-hmm. And science background?
Background, yeah.
I want to make a pitch for really digging into the science portion of your beat coverage. Because, let's see if we can get this going here. We are all climate reporters. We are all science reporters. Let me give you just a quick rundown of what you did yesterday that you didn't know you did. So when you drove up to Ronan, how many of you saw the train? Did any of you see an oil train with all white cars, all white tankers? So what you drove through from Missoula to a place called Thompson Falls, right through the middle of the Flathead Indian Reservation, is a stretch of track that the railroad and the oil company consistently refused to maintain. And so they consistently wrecked trains there. Sorry, back up. The train runs by an oil pipeline, which the oil company refused to maintain. Got to get my history right here. That oil consistently leaked into the watershed, into all of the ecosystem up there. The oil company would not maintain it. The Flathead Indian Reservation, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, complained and complained and complained, and finally said, this is an issue of sovereignty. You are messing up our land. You will fix it. And the oil company said, no, it's just fine. And the Confederated Salish and Kootenai said, okay, fine is, we're cutting off your pipeline. And they shut the pipeline down using their sovereign status as an independent government. And the result was the oil company has to move its oil from, it gets to Missoula from the oil fields in eastern Montana, gets put on that white train and trained through the Flathead Indian Reservation to Thompson Falls on the other side, where it gets put back in the pipeline and sent on to the Pacific coast. That was a serious flex of CSKT sovereignty muscle. Then what happened? Once they realized that they could do that, we started rebuilding Highway 93, which you all drove up to get to Ronan. Did you notice just before you got to Ronan, it turns into this 5-lane thing with a gigantic bridge over the top? Bridges are a major pain in the ass. Bridges are hard to build. They screw up everything else. If anybody wants to move some major industrial equipment through there, they have to figure out how to dismantle that bridge in order to get enough height to move it through, or you have to figure out how to move around it. They're expensive, they're hard to maintain. Did any of you notice what happened when you drove through the town of Arlee just before you got to Pablo? You're driving up the road on a 4-lane road, and then all of a sudden you're on a 2-lane road as you go up on the right side. And when you came back down, you're coming down on a 4-lane road, and all of a sudden you're on a 2-lane road on the other side of town. Because again, the CSKT got in the way of the Montana Highway Department and the Federal Highway Department when they were rebuilding Highway 93 and said, we don't want a 5-lane barrier in the middle of our town. And what they forced the negotiation to do was split and run 2 lanes north on one side of town and 2 lanes south on the other side of town, and made the town an island in the center. So now the community does not have to jump 5 lanes of traffic to get to school. This is what happens when communities realize that they've got some power, and the usual way of doing things, and things like highway departments are all about usual way of doing things, collide, and local activism makes a difference. One other thing you might have noticed, there was a bridge, an overpass that you went through as you were just coming up out of Missoula. Anybody notice that one? A gigantic, world's biggest culvert. That's the Animals Bridge. That is one of the biggest above-ground wildlife crossings in North America. And it is right on a major deer, elk, and bear migration path. What you didn't notice as you were driving up there, there's another 19 tunnels underneath the highway to further facilitate animal movement. And again, that's because A, the CSKT got in the way of the highway department and said, there's more problems than just fat roads here. There is a huge number of people dying, getting badly injured, or wrecking their cars from wildlife running into them. And if you do something about the wildlife once, you put these tunnels through, and you might have noticed there was 6-foot fences on the sides of the roads. All of a sudden, you don't have deer in your grill anymore. And the number of crashes, the number of injuries, and the number of deaths on that road plummeted. That has a direct impact on your car insurance, because it's that many people who are not filing claims because they don't have a deer in their grill or their windshield. So that's the kind of collaborative change that we can cover as journalists when we get into how communities fight for what they see as their rights on things that aren't really obvious. Like, who thinks of transportation as a social issue? The World Bank. The biggest problem with the World Bank's economic development program is every time they come to a country that's on the bottom end of the economic scale, what's the first thing they do? They build roads through everything. And then the wildlife biologists come through and say, you know where the elephants go? You know where the camels go? You know where the koala bears go? Right across the road you just built. Now you got a problem. The World Bank is still trying to figure that out. So that's just an example of where these stories will show up that aren't in the usual City Hall, Health Department, Congress zone of things. Look around the actual landscape you're working with, and they will appear to you. We also get sort of trapped in the idea of using the landscape for the purposes of other people like real estate developers. I'm sure you're all sick and tired of your editors coming at you and saying, you know, oh, somebody just put our town on the 10 best list for milkshakes or koala bear watching or whatever. We need a story. It's like, bite me. But, you know, there's a huge industry of making these lists and trying to promote whatever it is they're trying to promote. In our business, it's things like climate refuge. Where's a good place to go hide from the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the killer bees, the earthquakes, the ice storms, the floods, the avalanches? You want a nice place. So Emma Johnson, reporting fellow for the Pulitzer Center, picked Western North Carolina. I think this thing needs a battery. Yeah, we all know what happened in North Carolina, right? Missoula, where you are right now, if you were watching the heat maps of the hottest summer on record all this summer, you know, the great big smear of red where the temperature is all 3 digits and everybody's passing out and dying on the sidewalk. And there was a dip. You might have caught that. North Idaho, western Montana. We were literally the cool place in the country. You know, we are considered a climate refuge. This is, you know, in large part driven as a trend story, but you need to dig a lot deeper into it because things like this in North Carolina happen. When you start changing the climate and changing what's known as stationarity. Anybody deal with that term? Stationarity is a statistical term of art where if you've got a gigantic pile of data, like say a century's worth of weather and climate data, how much snow falls every year, that you can use it in a predictable fashion. And you do things like predict how much water is going to flow into a reservoir behind a dam so that you know when it's going to come, when you need to have extra space in it so that if a flood happens, the reservoir can hold it and not blow the dam out. It's just basically how you operate the system. About 8 years ago, the statistical world tried to inform everybody that stationarity is dead. Climate change has happened so fast and so comprehensively that pretty much anybody who is making their day-to-day operations based on long-term climate data is SOL. They no longer have a predictive system that's going to tell them how much water is going to come, how reliable the irrigation system is going to be, how much the temperature and the phenology, the times when the leaves are going to pop out and buds are going to show up, which needs to be the times when the bees show up to pollinate everything or your fruit trees don't get fruit. All of those dates are falling apart. All of that is rattling through industries, agriculture, communities that are depending on things happening at a predictable time. And when you frame it that way, when you frame it as, you know, your cherry festival doesn't happen at the time that you have always had, you know, this week is cherry festival, and the cherries aren't there because the cherries all froze in January. You don't even have to say climate change. You don't have to piss off half of the electorate of the United States who is bound and determined to say that climate change is a hoax and a made-up thing to stampede people into some sort of a woke liberal bottle trap. Avoiding getting into that conversation in the first place and just going straight to the cherry farmer and saying, "You gonna have cherries on Cherry Festival Day?" And then let their logbooks do the work for you. Just skip right over. You know, the Guardian has been doing things like saying it's not climate change, it's climate emergency. I'm not sure that's going to help any of us. It's definitely not going to, even for those of us who are deeply engaged in climate, going to help our mental health. You know, going to bed at night again, knowing we are one day closer to the sun burning up and destroying all life. Yay! I'm going to get up tomorrow and do it again. You know, we need to just to keep our own heads functioning, get out of that doom loop, and and be focused on doing what you can where you are right now. One of the biggest things about climate change, about global warming, is that it moves people. It literally, physically moves. You gotta get up and get out of the way of the flood. You gotta go find your house after the tornado came through. But that's a classic first world American response to it. A way bigger response to climate change, the US military started talking about this back in the 1990s. George H.W. Bush, if you all remember him, put into the US global military strategy that climate change was going to be a major strategic factor for military preparedness, because when you have things like Central Africa drying out and the Sahel and the Sahara deserts radically expanding both north and south into what used to be agricultural areas, all the people who live in those areas suddenly can't have their way of life anymore, can't have their economy, can't have any of their civilization infrastructure working the way it did, and so they move. And we're not just talking about people getting out of the way of a flood and coming back in a week. We're talking about millions of people all of a sudden in refugee camps, which are not happy places, trying to figure out what to do next and frequently resorting to violence. If you want to look at where the Syrian war broke out, don't look at political leaders poking each other in the eye. Look at where the Syrian agricultural economy collapsed 5 years before all the fighting started. And all of a sudden, all the farmers in Syria had nothing to do and asked the government for help, and the government had nothing to help. And then things went south. So when you're looking at climate and community development, you're looking at big picture things. So today, we've got people in this room, maybe some of you, who have got friends in the way of Milton. And God bless you all. Let's hope that we get through this. But look at what we did that made Milton so much of a problem. This is Tampa Bay in 1940. And the colored spots are where population development was starting to happen, housing units per hectare. This is 1970. This is 2000. This is 2024. Where is Milton going? Right there. So the trend stories about, do you want to live by the water? Do you want to live in a 12-month of the year sunshine? Became the trend story. How do we rebuild Tampa Bay after we drop a Class 3 or Category 3 hurricane on it and sit there for a day? This, by the way, is all coming from Steven Stradler. He's on X right now, and I just stole this yesterday. I built an awful lot of this yesterday because this is a classic example of what's going to have to be our coverage on so many levels in the next year. Hurricanes aren't over like the day after. Anybody in New Orleans knows how long Katrina is still a thing. As a health reporter, as a city government reporter, as a growth reporter, as a business reporter, the amount of just churn that you put through a community when you put a natural disaster like this on top of them is a years-long thing. And it's not something that's all going to be settled in a city council meeting. It's going to be settled in people's sidewalks and their water systems and their health department clinics. It's going to be all over the place. Any of you guys members of the Society of Environmental Journalists? Highly recommend you plug into these folks. You don't even have to be a paying member to get on their newsletter, which gets you access to their tip sheet. And especially if you are in a health and community development, they're all over where the environment starts throwing elbows into our human-made world. These dams are everywhere. And most of them were built in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s and are hitting the end of their practical lives, just as we are putting the climate on steroids to test just how good that old engineering was. PFAS. Who all's covering PFAS? What are the rest of you doing? Get into this stuff, man. Anybody bought a raincoat lately? Anybody notice the sales on raincoats? The huge clearance aisle on raincoats? Why is that? Because they are getting rid of all of their PFAS-soaked inventory, because PFAS was the greatest thing to happen to raincoats. That is what Gore-Tex is. That is why when you go to REI or Dillard's or any of those places, the raincoats are on deep discount, because they want them off the shelf so that they can bring in the new stuff that doesn't have PFAS. Yeah? PFAS? I have no idea. It's whoop.
It's a forever chemical.
It's a forever chemical that gets into your all manner of parts of your body. It's a hormone disruptor. It's probably a cancer-causing agent. It was in Teflon on your frying pan. It was in Gore-Tex in your raincoat. If you've got anything in your clothing that is stain-resistant, that's it. More importantly, and more community-wide, if you're near a military base or a firefighting operation, PFAS is in the flame retardant. And they go out and train with that stuff, and they spray it all to hell and gone, and then it soaks into the ground, goes straight into the aquifer, straight into the drinking water system. And you can't get rid of it. Well, I take that back. You can get rid of it. There are ways to get rid of it if you know it's there and if you start doing something about it. Most people don't know it's there, don't know what to do. We need to tell them. This is cutting off things. I threw this up because right above where you can't see, there are a number of operations running around today that are doing what is called attribution science. And this is when you have a natural disaster, you have a extreme rainfall event, drought, wildfire, hurricanes, tornadoes. These folks can get you hard, peer-reviewed evidence to show that what just happened is not normal and is related to climate change. For example, Milton. Why is that storm so big? Because the Gulf of Mexico is unprecedentedly hot. And when you have really hot water underneath a really big hurricane, the hurricane essentially eats it like steroids and gets bigger. It's happening more frequently now. Helene had the same issue because, again, the Gulf of Mexico was way hotter than it's ever been. And they can point to, here's where the graph goes, here's what's normal, and here's what's now. And then you have somebody, instead of just some local person who's like, yeah, I've been watching hurricanes for 50 years and I've never seen this before. Then you can have a guy in a white coat and a stethoscope saying, yeah, and science backs you up. Attribution science. I lost the connections up there, but if you just Google that, you will find a variety of places. Thomson Reuters through Oxford University is doing a bunch of it. I believe the AP has its own attribution science connections. It's a really handy way to, when you have a localized disaster, a localized health issue that has a climate angle, to just bring in the reinforcements to make your case. So as Rachel mentioned, I am doing a big project that is supported by a Kozik environmental grant. This is Coal Strip, Montana. This is what a coal-fired power plant looks like. So this right here, obviously, is the power plant. It's a little bit hard to reach here, but this conveyor belt line goes all the way down, and I'll show you that in a second. But these ponds here are the waste ponds of all the ash that comes out of this power plant and has to go somewhere. And nobody really knows what to do with them. They are loaded with all manner of heavy metals and other toxins that are leaching straight into the aquifer. This is an ongoing major problem that the Coal Strip owners have been basically trying to say, isn't that much of a problem because nobody lives here and everybody who lives here loves coal anyway, so why not? This is kind of fascinating to look at the housing in here. This is a very wealthy town. Median income, $87,000 a year per household. All of these houses are temporary. These are mobile homes, these are man camps, these are modulars that were all brought in because this is a boom town. This is a town that virtually didn't exist in 1970 when it was just the mining operation that had been going on since 1900. And then they decided to build a power plant there. They needed 10,000 workers, so they just threw up shacks, built the power plant, and then they needed about 3,000 workers. So the 3,000 workers just moved into the shacks. Nobody ever bothered to build a foundation. Nobody ever bothered to make this thing a permanent place, but everybody had a ton of money. So you've got these little shacks with great big motorboats and jet skis and snowmobiles and all the rest of the toys that you can build when you don't have to spend money on housing. But it gives you an idea of how impermanent the power industry thinks of itself. That it's just, we're here to get it done, and as soon as it's done, we're gone. So that conveyor belt is right here. This is a strip coal mine. And what you do is you remove all this overburden here and you get down to the strip of black coal up here. It's a little hard to see, but this is the what's called the drag line. It is the world's biggest type of power shovel. And it's just pulling all this off. Eventually it'll get down to this layer. And then what they'll do, and this is kind of fun to watch if you ever get a chance to see it, which you won't, once they get this out, they never tell you when it's going to happen. They line the whole side of this with explosives, and then they blast it. And this whole edge falls in. And then they resurface all this, cover it back up. These piles right here are the topsoil that they removed off of this. The topsoil in Montana is usually anywhere from about 6 inches to maybe 2 feet. We are not talking about the Midwest where it goes down for 20 feet deep. So they gotta save it as best they can, put all this stuff back, recover it with the topsoil. They've even marked things like these sandstone formations here. They pick those up, put them somewhere, mark the spot, and then when they recover it, they put them back. And then this whole thing moves this way to the next layer of coal, because this is underneath here. This is something like 400 million acres of coal. It goes in Montana, the largest coal deposit in the lower 48 states, the Powder River Basin. 41% of the entire nation's coal reserves is mostly across eastern Montana. So this is what they're digging. This is Yellowtail Dam, which is just a little ways away from all this. And this is the wind farm, which is just over the hill from the coal mines. And what I'm looking at is the town of Colstrip is a 100-year-old white town that has had political power because of the huge amounts of money that it's been making off of those coal mines and that power plant. And it's entrenched in Helena in the capital. Right next to them is the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation. Right next to them is the Crow Indian Reservation. Now, all three of these are geologically fundamentally the same. They are all sitting on the same seam of coal. But the Northern Cheyenne have never mined their own coal in any sort of industrial fashion. And they have cultural reasons for not messing around with what's underground. The Crow have been mining coal for the last 50 years. They have had a very productive mine, except that national and international economic forces are driving everybody in the utility world away from coal. And the Crow just lost their last customer for their coal. So that translates to the loss or imperilment of nearly 1,000 jobs on a reservation with only 8,000 people that were all tied to coal royalties, all underwritten by having that coal mine functioning. Now you've got options like wind farms, solar farms, something on the order of $700 billion in Infrastructure and Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, that the Biden administration passed as part of their post-COVID economic stimulus. Millions and billions of that are aimed right at this area, as everything from rooftop solar for all to a $700 million transmission line. What's not to like? Can anybody see it right here? What's missing in this picture?
People.
Where's the parking lot? Where is the community in a wind farm? Where is the punch clock and the school and the infrastructure of a town that your dad grew up in and worked at this place and your mom worked at the school that was built by this place? There's a gigantic amount of inertia in old fossil fuel related industries that even though they know it's killing you, they know it's poisoning the water, they know it is losing all of its clients, they know the whole world is trying to go green, they may have been affected by Milton and God knows what all else in the climate department, they're still not really thrilled about switching over to this. And spending time in there is the only way you find out that what the Biden administration's hoped for poster child of economic renewal in the green energy sector is really having a hard time getting traction, is really having a hard time convincing people that, yeah, I'm going to let go of what me and my parents, and in some cases their parents, have always done for some new, different thing. And that, again, is our mission, our ability, our superpower, is to go and hear these people and then bring the bigger picture to them and see what they think about it. Make the feedback loop, not just say, didn't you know there's $700 million of work sitting here for you, dummy? Yeah, that goes over well. You bring it in, you hear what they say, you bounce it back to the guys who are flying around with the B-52s full of money saying, you realize you don't have a landing place here. For example, the EPA did a roadshow all the way across Montana on Solar for All, which is their big project to put rooftop solar on anybody's roof who asks for it. They'll put a nice big solar cell and a battery system. They will even train your local neighbor carpenter how to fix your roof so that it will hold the solar cell. They've thought this thing through, right? Unless they talk to the guys in the Department of Interior who were trying to build utility scale solar farms. Who is going to build a utility scale solar farm when all of their potential customers have individual solar on the roof? Right hand, left hand. Did you talk? No, you didn't talk. People in the middle, confused. Duh. So this is what I am chasing around trying to put a handle on, and it's a little bit pressured because I'm trying to put a handle on it before Election Day so that when people go to the ballot box, they actually have some hard material in their hand to say, all these politicians who are promising me the sky and a free pig, this is where things actually wind up. So this is how you find me. And we've got a few minutes left, and I am happy to carry on the conversation. Yeah.
Where's the mic? Hold on.
Oh.
Hi, so my name is Brittany McGee. I'm with the Ledger Inquirer in Columbus, Georgia. And, you know, when you were talking about Helene and how, you know, these storms can make people move, obviously Georgia, you know, not Helene, sorry, Milton, getting them confused.
It's only 2 weeks apart, come on.
Right. But, you know, you were talking about how these storms can, you know, make people move with evacuations and things like that. I wonder, because Columbus is kind of situated in southwestern Georgia, you know, have you looked into like the possibility of people just kind of saying, we don't want to live in Florida anymore if we're going to have these huge major hurricanes every 2 weeks, every fall? You know, what impacts like that might be on neighboring states, and not even just Florida, like Louisiana, you know, lower Mississippi, lower Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, all of those Gulf Coast states and Atlantic East Coast states. You know, have, you know, you seen any research or anything about just like the movement of populations into neighboring states?
Thanks to Katrina, there is a ton of research on that. You know, regardless of what I just said about stationarity and climate details, demographic science has really come to your rescue there. The impacts of Katrina were widely measured, where people went to, how long they stayed there, did they go back, did they become permanent little New Orleans islands in Texas or Florida or somewhere else. So yeah, you can find that. You can also find that internationally. You know, you look at various diasporas of Rohingya refugees, Kashmiri refugees, Palestinian refugees, Sudanese refugees. Basically put in, fill in the blank refugee. There's research on where did these people go. You know, Haitians eating cats in Ohio. Back up a step, what are Haitians doing in Ohio? You know, what's going on in Haiti? Where is everybody in Haiti going to? Follow, blocking on the word, when you're living somewhere else and you're sending money home. Remittances, thank you. I was going to say repatriation, no. There's an awful lot of research on remittances. That is a backdoor to where people are moving and where people are sticking. Where they're sending their breadwinners in order to support the parts of the family that can't escape wherever it is they're stuck. Track that around, and you can really start to see the network of people who are trying to get out of the way of hell. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bria Overs. I'm a business reporter at the Baltimore Banner, and I have a light obsession with coal-fired power plants. So our
do you have
local,
a business card?
I do, yeah. No, I don't, but we'll connect. So our local power plant, which is like 10 miles from Baltimore, is called Brandon Shores. It is set to close. Well, it's in a very weird spot, which we can talk about in great detail later. But I'm wondering if Montana has kind of dealt with any coal-fired power plant closures in recent years, and if you know how that has like turned out or worked out, if you have any background, I'm kind of looking for comparisons so that way Baltimoreans can kind of know, like, this is the direction it could go in, and here's like an example of how that turned out for some of my own reporting.
I am not going to be your greatest resource, but I know who will, because I am leaning on him like a crutch. He's really been covering the coal industry here and the number of mines that have shut down. The biggest thing for your immediate readers, and the thing that I'm boning up on really fast about the Crow coal mine, is what does shut down mean? So in the sense of Westmoreland Coal, which owns the Sarpy mine, the Absoluca mine, hasn't shut it down. It has just stopped production. And the technical difference there is when they say shut down, then they have to start cleaning up. If they've just stopped production, they don't have to spend a dime on cleanup. And the longer they can stall that out, the faster they can either move towards bankruptcy or otherwise start the shell game of hiding the resources so that they can say, oh, dang, the cleanup money went away. So yeah, watch the heck out of where they are in the technical legal process between stopping production and actually having to start cleaning up and tearing the place apart. And yes, we can talk a lot more.
Hi, my name's Julia Fraser, and I'm a development reporter for Pittsburgh's NPR station. And I'm really interested in doing probably a fairly big project looking at the economic impact of all of this layered federal investment, you know, the BIA, the IRA. Also, we have a huge concentration of abandoned mine lands in southwestern Pennsylvania on these former coal communities. And I guess my question is more of a practical journalist question of, you know, there's a lot of places, there's so much. How do you sort of focus these sort of big topics into sort of tangible stories? I guess, you know, what,
That's a really
I guess, you know, any tips for honing my pitch here?
The way I built the Kozik story here was looking into the three-part or the three community side by side, which each one of the other two give context to the third. So if you're just looking at one, how are you doing this? You're facing the problem you got about, you know, how does this relate? When you can say it went here compared to the guys down the road, that gives you an opportunity if you want to go on a solutions journalism track, if you guys are familiar with that. Because if they've got a cleanup that's done or a tear down or whatever they ended up doing, then you've got data. You can say comparable case study here ended up with this result, and this result. New place is going to try things. Are they going to go for option A, B, or C? This is what's likely to happen because this is how the solution played out. And remember, for those of you who do solutions journalism, it doesn't have to be a success story. You know, you can say, they tried this solution, we showed that this solution was tried before and fell on its face. Is everybody aware that, you know, this is what the data showed, this is the insights that grew out of it. Take this and call me in the morning. But finding those comparative communities, moving your scope up a couple of flights. I think especially in a place like Pennsylvania where you've got all of these different mines, where you've got all these different characters, you know, some places are going to have one of those wizards in town who just can get everybody to come to the bake sale and then everybody to go to the council meeting and then everybody to write their congressman, and others are just going to be whatever, I don't know, I can't do anything. That gets you your people angle into the story. The other thing you've really got to watch out with, especially in coal, but in fossil fuels in general, is some massively expensive misinformation. There are some serious bullshit artists running around. Where's the little... Yeah, this one doesn't even have the little chasing arrows. But you've all seen the lawsuit going on about the chasing arrows. Yeah, we're going to turn these into fleece jackets. No, we're not. We're going to burn them and throw them right back in the atmosphere. And we're going to come after anybody who says we're doing that. So, you know, watch for that play. There was a great story in the Washington Post about the little Ohio town just last week that had a essentially fake news site set up to say what a great job their fossil fuel cleanup was doing, when in fact the entire thing was an industry-fed sham. Yeah, thank you. So, you know, there's, in addition to the legitimate status quo inertia of a community, you know, scared to give up their island of security and tradition, there are people with tons of money who are just buying time by making your life harder. Yeah.
Hi, Rob. My name is Federica. I work for Univision News Digital. And one topic that we're interested in looking at, and also wanted to ask you, you know, tips as a journalist, is disaster recovery efforts. Like after the storm comes, after the wildfire, who gets hit the hardest, what kind of homes, and what people are usually tasked with, like reconstruction efforts. Because we've seen in Florida, for example, that a lot of Hispanic immigrants that are part of our audience have told us they stay behind to kind of help get jobs in those areas, right? So I was wondering, here in the West, what have you seen in terms of the inequities when it comes to after the disaster, and what kind of things you think, you know, are worth looking into?
So two kind of very different directions you can chase there. One is the reconstruction industry. You know, part of the reason that we're all having every one of our communities is having difficulty building houses is because so many carpenters are rebuilding houses. And these guys tend to be very transient. They go where the money and the jobs are, and where the money and the jobs are where the disasters just hit. And we have had our wild share of disasters, whether it's rebuilding Paradise in California because it burned to the ground, or soon to be rebuilding Tampa Bay because it blew away. Or actually, it probably didn't blow away, it got washed away. Side note, one of the really funky things that we're going to be seeing in the next week about this Milton storm is how much water it moved. And we're not talking rain, we're talking tidal water, Tampa Bay bashing around. That's a whole different level of destruction when you've got a storm surge that's 13 feet, you know, compared to even a wind of 130 miles an hour. Yeah, that's going to blow stuff around and break a lot of windows and rip roofs off. You get a foot of water moving at you, it flips your car. You get 13 feet of water moving at you, I don't want to be there. So the level of destruction we're going to have in places that got hit by those flood surges is going to be remarkable. The rebuilding, you know, you're going to like have foundations torn out. So the rebuilding industry is one place I would look. The lot harder and more interesting thing is going to be the corruption and scamming going on with the initial surge of rebuilding money. When Hurricane Maria took out Puerto Rico, I think it was Maria, right? I'm still trying to figure this out. 4 guys in Whitefish, Montana, right up the road from me, got the contract to rebuild the entire electrical grid of Puerto Rico. It's like, you guys don't even speak Spanish. You couldn't find Puerto Rico on a map, and you just got the whole caboodle to do this because you were classmates with Ryan Zinke, who at the time was our congressman, soon to be the head of the Department of Interior. Before he got so stinky that even Donald Trump didn't want to have him around. Yes, he is back in Congress and running for re-election. But, you know, stuff like that, fortunately, we pretty much uprooted those guys. And so at least Puerto Rico is not being screwed by Whitefish. I cannot guarantee that Puerto Rico is not being screwed by whoever picked up the contract from the Whitefish boys. But that, you know, the federal government, God bless its little heart, is really good at loading B-52s full of money and then just bombing it. As we all saw in COVID and the payroll protection program and all the other things. And any of you who asked, where's the accounting? Does anybody have to file a follow-up? Does anybody have to say what they spent the money on? They never got there. They just launched the B-52s and bombed the money. And then they went, oh, dang. We don't know where it went. Disasters are mini versions of COVID-19 that are just going to keep happening all over the place. FEMA obviously is the point source for the immediate next couple of weeks money, but then that gets on to bigger things. The other considerably scarier problem, how many of you are familiar with reinsurance? So you got your insurance companies, you got your State Farm and your Geico and all those guys, and they are supposedly backing up your cars and houses and whatnot. Where do they go for trouble? They go to a thing called the reinsurance industry. And the reinsurance industry is A, global, and B, private. It is not run or regulated by any government. There is no sheriff watching what the reinsurance industry does. It is a financial orbiting planet of its own. And it's in existential terror. It is looking at, again, stationarity is gone. The level of natural disasters all over the planet are rolling so high that the reinsurance industry is trying to figure out how are we ever going to cover all of the bets that we made that are all getting called at the same time. And that's why, you know, in Missoula, Montana, I'm living in an urban city with a paved street in front of me and a fire hydrant 200 meters down this hill. And my neighbor just lost his homeowner's insurance because of wildfire danger. And it was mainly because he got in a fight with his insurance company, his longtime insurance company, about 4 years ago, and switched to a new guy. And the new insurance company doesn't have any sense of loyalty to him. And so the minute they had a chance to drop him, hot rock. I fortunately haven't had a fight with my insurance company, or I'm sure I would be in the same hot rock pile. But insurance companies all over the country are backing out of what used to be routine coverage. This is going to ripple all through the housing market because the banks that give you the home loans or that underwrite the project developments all want those things insured so that their finances are covered. The banks are having trouble getting insurance. They're passing that right on to the buyers. This means when the next disaster comes through, the chances that anybody's got any coverage are real iffy. What do they do?
And we are coming.
On that happy note, all the hands go up.
No, we are coming to the end of our session, but I wanted to get one more question in.
Hi, my name is Lisa Kalakal. I cover local government for the NPR affiliate station in Kansas City. When you were talking about the highway expansion here, that made me think Kansas City is one of those cities that got federal grants to essentially remedy or at least study the harmful impacts caused by highway construction. So the difference there is that the highways are already constructed and they cut through predominantly Latino communities, the predominantly Black community in Kansas City. And so when we talk about inequities, it's causing higher asthma rates, actually the most dangerous stretches of roads in terms of pedestrian deaths and crashes occur, on these highways. And we just got the money. And so, I don't see change right now, and this is going to take years in terms of community engagement. I don't even know. They're not even talking about tearing up the highway. They're just talking about what infrastructure improvements can they do to improve people's lives without actually tearing up the highway itself, which I think is really interesting. So as this process, goes on, and we have different elected officials in a few years, what would you recommend in terms of what to look for and what to pay attention to for a project? Because I find it interesting that they're trying to kind of remedy the harms that have already been caused and probably will continue to happen for a long time as a result of these highways.
Mm-hmm. You're familiar with the adage, to a small boy with a hammer, the whole world is a nail. Mm. So a highway department is the classic version of that. The highway department sees the whole world through the windshield of a car. So what does a car need? A car needs really straight roads, because when you put turns, the cars go in the ditch. What does a car need? A car needs a way to turn left against oncoming traffic. So you got 4 lanes, let's put a 5th lane in the middle so that it's got a turn bay. A car needs visible lights to tell it when to go and when to stop, so you use stoplights. All of that is through the car windshield. When you get a bicycle activist at the table and they start pointing out things like a roundabout gets rid of the people plugged up by a stoplight when there's no traffic going the other way, because everybody moves and the thing has worked all over the planet. Honest to God, I actually had my city government reporter be accused of being a tool of big roundabout. You know, there's big pharma, there's big oil, and there's big roundabout. You've never heard of them, but they're sneaky little fuckers. No, but when you start talking about multimodal transportation, when you start talking about, did you think about, you know, what you could have spent on your bus line? Did you think about electrifying your buses? You might have noticed one of the things we did with our COVID money in Missoula here was all of the buses that are running around the campus are electrified. You want to talk about your asthma. You've turned things upside down. You know, what causes asthma?
Car.
Particulate matter in the air.
Yes.
Where does the particulate matter in the air come from?
The
The cars.
Yeah.
Where do the cars come from? The roads.
Yep.
So, you know, cars are killing kids. If you start from the other direction, rather than cars need better ways to be cars, you need to break these agencies and these institutions out of their silos and say it's not all about what you see through the windshield.
I am once again struck by, for me, the timing of this conversation, but also the fact that how many of us would have had the opportunity to meet someone like Rob, who has the depth of expertise and the ability. I was so impressed to hear so many of you are like climate nerds, or you know, you're working on projects about natural resources and coal and whatever. It's an exciting time to be attempting to move into this field, but we are extraordinarily fortunate to have heard from Rob Chaney in this moment. And I think the major thing that struck me about his presentation was we're all climate reporters now. We all have to be. And so we are so grateful to you for taking time out to join us today, and let's show Rob Chaney our appreciation.